which you may or may not have seen if you've been on the internet. Things ranging from the conflict over tropes versus women in video games, to the New 52 reboot, to the crossplay fiasco, indicate a sort of cracking among geek culture, where as women become more and more vocal in their experience in the medium, they've come up against what has previously historically been a pretty male-dominated space. What's interesting about comics versus video games, as opposed to the kind of some of the stuff that we do, is that that's really one mainstream culture. Video games has one mainstream, supposedly generally fed you by the AAAs. Certainly comics are generally defined by mainstream capes, no matter how big the independent scene gets. But you know, it's a little different for anime fans. Anyone with any experience knows that even at the youngest ages, it's divided between shonen and shoujo. That for every Naruto or Bleach, there's a Kimi ni Todoke, a fruits basket, or a sake that, you know, are supposedly geared toward women, meaning the situation is supposedly kind of separate but equal.
Yeah, you know, let's not lose all hope yet. Let's just assume that you can go and watch Naruto, I can watch Kimi ni Todoke, and we can just coexist.
But see, Lauren, separate isn't equal.
Oh, well, let's...
One of the best ways I think to demonstrate that is to talk about volume.
Come on. Oh, really?
There we go. Lauren, what is this?
Well, here we have a list of anime we found on the cart driver. The actual creator of this list is aniblogger, also known as Cowboy Bibimbap on Twitter. And he has helpfully compiled a list of all the anime that's coming out this season. You've probably seen a few of these streaming on Crunchyroll, and if you're friends with any criminals, maybe you've heard that these are also fan subbed. But of course you wouldn't know anything about that. So, you know, I'm an optimistic person, and since I, forgot to practice the panel in advance, I'm just going to assume that we're going to have separate but equal here. Half of these slides, half of these anime are for me, half of them are for you.
No. My guess is 2/3.
Well, you're cheating. Clearly you prepared the panel in advance, because you're right, exactly 2/3 of this anime is for men.
But okay, so sure, obviously Dog Days is pretty pandering, and Love Love is based on an eroge, but like, 2/3 is a pretty big stretch.
And of course, this isn't all bad. I mean, that's not to say I'm not going to watch half of these with the red dots over them, even though they're not for me. Let's talk about why we decided to put red dots on some of these.
Basically what we did is we went through and looked at the original source manga, or Wikipedia entries, or AnimeD, where they tend to divide anime into genre. And again, you guys look like a pretty savvy crowd, but for those who haven't maybe come across it, anime, especially manga, tend to be divided into genres by who they market the magazine at. So again, everyone knows about Shonen Jump. Regardless of the fact that I'm sure there's plenty of women who read Shonen Jump, in fact, everybody in Japan reads Shonen Jump, the magazine is supposedly marketed for young boys. Similarly, Shoujo B is supposedly marketed to young girls. So when an anime is defined as shonen or seinen, they're not saying that that's the only people who will enjoy it, but that's supposedly their intended audience.
Yeah, that's right. I love Shonen Jump, and I love shonen anime, so is there really any problem that most of these are marketed towards men?
Well, so the issue here is that what we're seeing here is the tip of the iceberg of male-dominated culture. And I could probably talk for days about how that actually gets down and dirty in the anime, but since we've got some interesting things that involve you guys and want to get to the end of the panel, I want to tackle one issue. It's pretty easy to see and pretty straightforward if we talk about how people are objectified in both anime, from both sides. Lauren, does this slide make you uncomfortable?
Just a tidbit. It's basically a wall of boobs.
Yeah. But we have here three characters from pretty popular shonen shows. And what we have on here is actually two different types of objectification. First, in the middle, has actually got a long history. That's Horizon from Horizon in the Middle of Nowhere, airing currently on Crunchyroll. And Horizon is a lovely robot girl with no emotions who's the plot MacGuffin. Basically, the entire series revolves around saving her emotions and bringing her back to being a whole person. And this is pretty common. Inori from Guilty Crown, who aired a couple seasons ago, was the same thing. She mostly existed as a jar in which to hold the main character's sword. Melfina from Outlaw Star is a really old example that she was found in a suitcase and basically was a part of a starship that they were using to gain a treasure. This idea is that the woman herself actually doesn't have value as a character, and what it is that essentially she's actually an object. In addition, we also have the sort of normal type of objectification people talk about. We also have Heirs of Scarlet. Heirs of Scarlet's left to slide for those people following Fairy Tail. Any Fairy Tail fans in the audience? You guys know, Heirs is probably one of the most powerful waves in Fairy Tail. If you're following the manga, you know that she's actually pretty off the chain when she gets down to it. But no matter how powerful she is, Mashima still finds ways in which to undermine her strength by showcasing her beauty. She puts her in a maid outfit. He includes her in the beauty pageant the entire cast competes in during the inter-Fairy Tail competition. Each one of her successfully more powerful armors shows more and more skin. The idea here is no matter how powerful and unassailable Eris appeared at the beginning, and remember when we first met her, she was terrifying. Literally a monster in armor. That she still needs to be pretty and beautiful and accessible because we assume that the bunch of guys who are reading the manga want to see pretty girls. That's what girls are for, is to be pretty.
I chose Yoko for this slide because whenever I was telling people that I was giving this panel on sexism in anime fandom and was going to use Yoko as an example, they're like, what do you mean? Yoko is one of the strongest female characters that I can think of. And yeah, that's true, but just imagine you haven't seen Gurren Lagann. Is there anyone here who hasn't seen Gurren Lagann? Okay, there are a few. So if you haven't seen Gurren Lagann and you're looking at Yoko, the girl with the red hair on the left of the slide, you're not going to think she is the way she is, a powerful woman warrior. And even so, you know, when she was introduced at the very beginning of Gurren Lagann, one of the other characters, a male character, says, "Get out of the way, I'll handle this." And then, of course, Yoko kicks serious ass and shows them that she's very strong. But, I mean, just the way that she appears, with all her, all her weaknesses exposed, literally, you don't expect her to be the powerful woman that she is.
But, okay, so this is something that's known, and everyone says, you know, you give a little something to the target audience, and people think it's pretty reasonable. Here's the thing, if everything was separate but equal, what you'd see when you got into shoujo is you'd see equal pandering in other directions.
Yeah, that's right, Batches. I mean, you get your wall of boobs, and I get my anime male Chippendales.
Right, I mean, so maybe what about a show about a harem full of guys who do nothing but lay about and try and make women happy?
Yeah, let's check that. Yeah.
And I know you all love Oran, and it's actually a really good class commentary in addition to all the other things it is. But here's where we run into a problem. When you meet these guys, they're a bunch of layabouts at the tons. They spend all their time drinking tea and eating cakes and sitting around in a music room with nothing to do. But as we slowly learn, the two guys in kimonos are probably the world's most powerful martial artists, and the guy in the glasses is the world's foremost financial mind, and Tamaki Suyo, except for where Haru is concerned, can do basically anything he puts his mind to. It's interesting, we have these men who have been offered to us as eye candy and pandering, and yet the series goes to great lengths to demonstrate to you how we're supposed to care for them as characters. Which again is almost a complete different arc than you see for someone like Erza, who again, or you see for someone like Erza who again essentially establishes powerful and intimidating and becomes friendly and adorable. This idea that women become and evolve as characters by becoming more accessible and pleasant for their audience, and that men evolve as characters by becoming more realized as characters and more actualized and they actually take the show away from Haruhi in many ways. The end scene, while it shows Haruhi, remember, as a hero, she does it on the backs of all of her friends. And her, in the end, after jumping out of a car to save Tamaki, he's shown at the end carrying her out of the water. The idea here is even in the series where they're supposed to be second fiddle and objects of affection, they're shown as in charge and in control. This is not separate but equal.
Well, we've still got a few things. I mean, what about geek girls in anime? Geek girls who are just like me. I mean, can't I look up to them?
You can try.
Well, you see, here we have Kosaka Kirino. And then there's characters like Hinata Zumi in Lucky Star, and Kanako Ono in Genshiken. These girls all watch anime, cosplay, geek out at conventions, just like we do. And I think they may be the closest we have to relatable female characters, but I'm gonna argue they're not actually there for us. Let's start with Kirino. She's got the body of a model. She is a model, in fact. She wears these skimpy clothes. And she's got, like her otaku obsession is a little unusual for a young girl to have. You'd think an older male otaku would have it.
Well, wait, but Lauren, when you were her age, what were you into?
Well, you know, I was into like Shonen Ai and stuff, but she's into Little Sisters. Since it's PG-13, oh, what we got? Gotta get closer?
Okay.
Okay. Well, you see, she's into Little Sisters, and since it's a PG-13 panel, we'll just leave it at that. And then Ono is a cosplayer, and she's got a great figure. She's got like triple F breasts, and she loves to show them off in costumes. And of course, there's nothing wrong with showing off your body in costumes and feeling good about yourself. But when that's the only type of female geek that we see in anime, it just implies that real life female geeks are also just there for the male gaze.
Wait, hold on. Look, we're anime fans. We live in the 2D world, because the 3D world, let me put it this way, is boring. And so, look, I can leave it on the screen. I know Kirino isn't real, no matter how many times I cry on my documentary over her. So that obviously this stuff doesn't translate into the real world, because we know that those are geek objects, not actual people.
Well, I hate to break it to you, Patches, but just because your 2D Kirino Dakimakura is superior to 3D women, we inferior 3D women also feel the effects. For example, in last year, there was a lot of controversy surrounding Miss USA, formerly Miss Oregon. She actually won the pageant, but she proclaimed during the pageant, "I'm a geek." And immediately, she was subjected to scrutiny in the media about whether or not she could be allowed to use that label. Some people were like, oh, she's too hot to be a geek. Or she doesn't like the right geeky things. For the record, she said she liked Star Wars and studying history. But people said that didn't count. Basically, she didn't have the authority, according to the public, to decide whether she could label herself a geek or not.
But again, maybe it's an issue of context. You know, it's hard on Miss America, dressed in your beauty gown or your tiara, say you're a geek, and while it's awful, you know, maybe that. What about in a more geek-oriented situation? What about in a gun club store?
Yeah, I mean, it's true that we put celebrities under much more strict scrutiny, but this is something that's actually happened to me, and if you're a woman in fandom, I bet you've experienced this scenario yourself. When I was in Japantown, San Francisco, they have entire stores dedicated to Gundam models, and I love Gundam models. So I was shopping for a new one, and since the stores are so small, I asked a group of men to move out of the way so I could look at them. And they immediately stopped me. They started quizzing me about whether I actually built Gundams, asked me about my Gundam knowledge. It was really uncomfortable. It felt like a confrontation. I call this the geek test. People have an idea about what a real geek looks like. And if you don't fit that look based on your gender, ethnicity, fandom, or otherwise, you're subjected to this inquisition. Really, I don't think we can blame any one person for this mindset, but the way that geek girls are presented in the media certainly doesn't help. I mean, of course, this is just my experience.
Right, I mean, and this is something I've actually never experienced. And
so we've actually only shown 3 examples to prove this.
Yeah, so actually this is the portion where we went to ask the fans themselves. And now that we've sort of given you an overview of where we sit, at least as fans, this is the part of the panel where both we have some stuff, continue to have some stuff that we'd like to hear back from you guys. What we did is, in addition to us asking some questions and welcoming questions of your own, we had a couple of surveys. We did a cosplay survey and a fandom survey that we were looking at people who had gone to conventions and their experiences. And like I said, actually, and so this is an old slide. Since then, we've gone up to about 160 respondents. And I can either share the good news and the bad news that came out of the survey, or if you guys have questions and comments and things go, we can start there and then work back in the surveys. There's a microphone. Sorry. Okay, we'll go through the surveys real quickly.
But we have people already.
Oh, they came up. We can Okay.
So you guys are talking about all these animes and how they're so split, and I feel like this is far too black and white. So I want you to kind of delve into the more gray areas. For example, when I come off the top of my head, My Little Pony was supposed to be for little kids, and all of a sudden bronies have like risen and taken over. So just because they're labeled as such and they have the different characteristics doesn't mean that there aren't like good things about all these too, right?
So there's two parts. Lauren's actually a lot of brony scholarship. But the first part is that there's two things going on. One is about the portrayal and the way things appear. And so something that is relatively positive towards the study that I had, we're talking about ways in which anime and shows that were generally seemed cut and dry actually portrayed women or men differently. And that's a separate issue to some extent than the issue of bronies, which is about fandom appropriation.
Yeah, basically what we're going at here, and I think we did say this earlier too, is that we're looking at who these are marketed at. So for example, with My Little Pony, it's marketed at women. That's not to say that men can't enjoy My Little Pony, and that's not to say I can't sit down and watch Naruto, even though it's in shonen.
The point I think she's asking, and this is the thing, is that it's the second phenomenon about geek cred that's really alarming. That the bronies, the sense of entitlement and legitimacy supposedly given by male geeks to a thing leads them to believe that they get to own something that even isn't necessarily theirs. So that's bad. And it has nothing necessarily to do with, there's a really sort of deep thing going on that is sort of tangential about why I think people like My Little Pony so much, but I'd be overstepping my bounds.
So what about the animes or some of the shows that change based on, like the first season may have started off as childish of sorts. So like Avatar Last Airbender, I thought the first season was definitely for kids, but they picked up so many different just like older age groups that the second and third season seemed to be much deeper.
Well, I mean, the other way to look at it, and I think the Occam's razor answer is that if you were 12 when you watched the last Avatar, you're probably 16 now, and so when you want to see the sequel, they brought the sequel to older kids, and they wanted to address more adult themes, and the world that Aang lived in, they didn't think was that special. Now, I can't talk on behalf of the authors, but I think Avatar's a little different because we're talking about evolution in two different fan bases, and overall, Avatar gives a bunch of really positive messages about feminism. There's some problematic stuff in the second season about appropriation and you're driving out of native communities and that kind of stuff. So, and you run into those problems and you address more complex themes. So it's overall an improvement.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Patches, we've got so many people with questions. You think we should go over surveys?
Can we go over one of the surveys?
You're welcome to stay in line.
Okay.
Stay in line.
Yeah, because we don't actually have that much to say about our surveys, except that we had 100.
No, we have 45 minutes to answer a few more questions.
Goodness.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, you guys were speaking a lot about fan service, and I'm wondering if it might be, at least in certain respects, that the problem of fan service is as much the perception of the objectification of women as objectification of women itself. I mean, obviously objectification of women is a problem, but do you think that do you think there's a bit of gray area based on the perception of it? Like, I know that in my experiences with fandom, it seems like a scantily clad or otherwise attractive man is hardly ever perceived as fan service even when he might be, whereas every scantily clad woman is automatically assumed to be nothing but shallow fan service for men, regardless of her actual depth of character.
Yes, because in feminist theory, they talk about the beauty myth versus the success myth, and the idea there is that women are generally considered valuable insofar as they are attractive. When you talk about, and whereas male hotness is actually a pretty core Eastern concept, and so it's weird in anime. I think some of this has to do with a lot of the way we perceive things, but the issue here is that women, and this actually segues pretty well into the cosplay survey, the issue here is that because women are generally valued insofar as how attractive they are, their fan much more important and prominent. Whereas, like again, in Oron, the guys were pretty, but the series didn't focus on it, even though it focused on it. That for every eye catch they gave us a moment where he was awesome for character reasons. And for women, it sort of goes in the other direction, where the shows try very, very hard to demonstrate that women are accessible.
Okay.
The reverse character development we were discussing earlier.
So this, and the question that you ask, actually, I think it's easier when you bear it out in the cosplay survey, which is the more disturbing of the two surveys. Go to the next.
Next slide? Okay.
Oops.
Yeah, I do not know why it's flickering. The cosplay survey.
The reason why I think this bears itself out is that we posted a cosplay survey, and we got 97 respondents, and we asked them about the amount of harassment they got at conventions. And what we found is that over 1 in 2 people who identified as female or women who cosplayed received some kind of harassment. And a lot of it was directed at their attractiveness, whether it was
whether they were trying to be a fan servicey character or not.
Well, it was also generated where cosplayers were attractive, got accosted for numbers and invitations to go back to the room. Cosplayers who were unattractive got huge amounts of flack. You know, if you were dressed as a hot character and the person didn't think you were hot, you got an earful of maybe you should go with someone else. And the idea here is that yes, because women are, as one point out with Kirito, because women are considered objects of desire, your performance as an object of desire affects how you're perceived, and that's a really negative thing. And that's again this idea of beauty myth.
I have an opinion that I'd like you in the audience, if they so choose, to respond to. I hold the opinion that the female form is the true and true kind of concept of beauty. The aesthetics of the female body are, to me, what is the true natural thing to be, if you want to be great. So, yeah. So, for every Cloud Strife, for every Orin High School, you notice increasingly effeminate features on the men. The testosterone, gun-wielding John Rambo has been out the door decades ago. So,
except for Toriko and One Piece and portions of Naruto and Fist of the North Star, right?
Toriko's got those kind of feminine eyes, kind of doe eyes. If you want to get really into it.
You did get really into it, didn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, you're absolutely correct, and I think that's one of the things that is true is that, yes, those images are moving closer towards this idea. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Short Path, but it's a web comic by Dave Willis where he pointed out that if you look at, let's say, Western superhero comics, and you talk about men being objectified, that all these hulking muscle brutes are actually what we call power fantasy, that you'd want to look like the guy who could break someone's head into, and that's not necessarily what we want to look at. And that's sort of what you're identifying, is you notice that Cloud has become actually successively, as he gets restyled more feminine, it's more accessible, more, I guess Dave Willis said it was built for speed.
But what I believe this whole shift in what characters are presented, even the character I'm cosplaying, he's a girly man. So I think this is kind of a shift in, I don't want to get so hoity-toity as to say the human condition of all these decades of women pushing for their rights, but...
Right, but don't stop, is the issue.
And even if we're saying that some sort of female form is the ideal form, I mean, women look all kinds of different ways. You can't just pick one this ideal way. Well, it's just whether we pick men or women or some type of body type to be the ideal form, it's just there's still always a problem.
Like a pony?
Yeah. And it's always impossible.
Right, but the idea is if that's okay, and you like that, you need to push for that. You need to consume media that falls in line with that.
But I believe it's inherently a good thing, and as Alan Moore said, culture is turning to steam. It's a whole different outlook. What the future brings is up to it.
I feel like a lot of the conversation and a focused almost more on identity and its relationship to con culture and I feel like a lot of the panel that you presented focuses more on identity than even like the role of sexism in anime. And I was curious to see what you guys would think about how gender rather than sex itself is portrayed in anime, whether there's a difference between the two. And there are characters who have a lot of gender ambiguity, like one of the main characters in Sorcerer Hunters is really sort of, you don't really
Bakuretsu Hunter's good old Taku reference, I like it.
Thank you.
I guess you could also use Noriko from Kushiki Yugi for some real old school gender bending.
Yeah, we're not going to go for super sharp.
Thank you for making me feel really old.
No, it's okay. I own it on VHS. It's okay.
But how do you guys feel that gender and sex are portrayed how are portrayed in anime culture?
Well, so it's tricky, and this is something that I need more education on, need to be more literate about. Somebody who has a better grasp on the nuance intricacies of gender fluidity and trans wants to speak a little more to it. But I think one of my I have two really least favorite examples. When I think of the three that I run into, one, the obsession with the word trap, that's bad. It needs to go. It needs to leave our fan lexicon, even though it's funny, because it's not funny that people would describe it. And two, there are opportunities that are definitely missed. Oran's a really good example. Haruki Fujioka identifies as non-gendered when she enters the anime, and they dress her up as a boy. So fun, gender bending, her dad is an Okama. The series makes a concerted effort to demonstrate that she will be happiest if she begins to behave and identify as feminine. That every time that she acts as a girl, when she goes to her country house, or at the end when she wears a dress, or when she has to dance with somebody, that they create these situations in which acting like a woman brings her happiness. And it's clear that the series doesn't care that she really didn't care about gender. They think that she needs to care.
Another example that just comes to mind is Italy in Civitalia.
Oh yeah. It seems like even more in anime than in other forms of media, gender is a very clear performance. And people, whether they are biologically male or female, they pick something and they go for it.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think that we need to be reading more One Piece. Echiro Oda has a pretty amusing opinion on how important gender is, even though he has, on one hand he has Sanji, who believes it's a man's job to do a man's thing, and then he has an entire nation of Okama who really think gender is a complete construct. And they're fantastic. They're some of my favorite characters. Razor, who's a bottom play fan? There you go. So I think it's this issue, and again, it's not something that I'm super literate in, but the problem is that the trap narrative trends poorly. Usually it's subversive. Maria Holic is a really horrible example. Or My Hime, where it's about an arc about realizing that even though you're pretending to be a man, you really should be a woman. These are things that I think, at least in the more mainstream titles, need to be handled better.
I'm sorry, I don't want to take up too much of my time, but would you say that this sort of hard line of gender binary within anime is almost pushing towards transphobia? Because you have this...
Again, they're called traps. That's transphobia.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to say I'm a little bit more of a gamer than an anime fan myself, but I mean, obviously there is some overlap. I get this whole discussion of gender and sex and whatnot is interesting to me because just recently there's been kind of a debacle in the fighting game community where you have a girl beating like an assortment of well-renowned male players in the game, and then everyone calls her out on it, and she's basically ostracized for it. I guess my question leading from that is, do you think there's a perception that certain, in geek culture, as in, the world at large, is there a certain perception where certain genders are more suited to certain things than others?
Yeah, that was the whole point of the geek test that we mentioned. And the thing is that, and this is one of the things that we wanted to get into now with this cosplay thing especially, you need to speak out against bad behavior. It's become clear, I think Jay Smooth did a really, really good thing on internet harassment, and you need you can't assume that the jerk-off behind you who's bad-mouthing girl Magic players at a Magic the Gathering event is going to know he's a jerk. Because if he knew he was a jerk, he might have changed his mind or care what other people think. You need to tell him. And this is especially true in gaming spaces. You need to mute and shame and enforce polite, nice behavior the same way that they try to mute and shame and...
Anita Sarkeesian. Yeah, if someone makes a beat-up Anita Sarkeesian game, tell them that's not okay.
Right.
If someone tries to weed out the fake geek girls, that's just a fan zone. One thing that's just terrifying about our cosplay survey is so many female-identified cosplayers have been harassed that it's likely we have each been in the presence of somebody being harassed or being put into an uncomfortable situation.
I mean, yeah, I think that's the thing that freaks me out. I know that I'm sometimes overwhelmed at conventions, but one of the questions I have for the class is how we can identify this better and see it better. The other thing that's super alarming is that nearly none of the respondents said that the convention staff were any help. Which is, I'm not here to badmouth any convention. I have lots of friends.
We're convention staffers.
And they do an amazing job, but what is weird to me is that that doesn't seem like a safe environment when the officials you can't run to for help.
Or you just feel like they won't take you seriously.
Right.
I think on that actually. A big part of that I think is, kind of stressing the anonymity of these reports. A lot of people feel like they would be singled out if they went to somebody about it and essentially ridiculed by, their peers on that. It's actually, and also how society would view them as well.
Well, I think the societal thing is something we can change. If we tell people we are a convention society. I don't know how many of you know Charles Dunbar, but we are a family and a religion almost, as he says it. And if we decide that we want people reported, we won't stand for this behavior, then we only have ourselves to blame if people don't feel that they can safely report these things, right?
Mm-hmm. One of the things about this panel is that, okay, so you might identify mostly as a gamer. And a lot of the time we see all this stuff that's going on in gaming and about how someone said that that sexism is endemic to the fighting game culture. And we say, and a lot of us think, oh, we anime fans, we're so open and accepting, we have it so much better, and yet we've still got these problems. And yeah, what Patch was saying about how we have to unite and say what we will and will not stand for.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Can I move this up? Okay. Yeah. I'm trying not to mess with it, otherwise I might break it.
All right.
Anyway, my question is similar to the last gentleman who just left about how I too am more of a gamer, and I also play a lot of fighting games, so I'm sure at least one of you is familiar with the incident with Cross Assault.
Yep.
Those of you who know, I'll speed you up real quick. The fighting game that's sweeping the nation, Street Fighter Cross Tekken, came out, and right before it, there was a reality show called Cross Assault, featuring different teams of various players from around it was either around the world or just around the U.S. playing the game, and one of the pro players was female. She obviously knew her stuff, like every gamer worth their salt should. And apparently, there was a very high number of sexist comments being directed towards her because she was a woman. Eventually, it got to the point where she said, "Screw this, I'm out," because it had gotten so bad. And one of the
her coach, right?
I'm sorry?
Wasn't your coach?
I was saying sexist
one of the more high-profile Tekken players, Eris Bactanians, said that, as you said earlier, the harassment was actually an integral part of the fighting game culture.
That's
which is an incredibly jackass statement, I thought. So I'm wondering if you and anyone else feel free to chime in. Yeah, what are your thoughts about that whole incident and how that could possibly correlate to the anime fandom?
It's the same thing. Call bullshit. Don't go, that guy's an asshole, what does he know he's doing? Be loud, be angry. And again, it's even more important. Well, my personal example is I went to a panel at Anime USA about con creepers. And somebody at the panel actually said something which something on the panel said something that clicked fine with me. He said, no one deserves to be treated a certain way when they're cosplay, except for those 14-year-old girls dressing as Yoko. I will give them the number of the perverts. And I turned to this guy and I was like, are you kidding me? She's still a person. It doesn't matter how she's dressed.
And that's just terrible. Because, I mean, we've already underlined that Yoko is a character that anyone should want to cosplay because the way her personality is. And it just happens that she is marketed towards men, and this is the costume they've chosen for her to wear.
And it's important because no matter, if you're on the subway, if you're at a convention, if you're sitting at lunch and you hear things that that make your skin crawl and are making other people uncomfortable, it's really hard, but you've got to stand up and say something because that's how the culture changes.
I can go to that slide about that. Basically, silence looks like agreement.
Yeah, this article also for video games is pretty amazing. It's called Guy's Guide. It's from Think Progress. And it's a guy's guide to being a feminist ally in video gaming. Basically, the moral of the story is when a woman is getting shouted off your game, you need to say something because it's ruining your experience too.
I can speak as a woman. It's pretty terrifying, and people might think that I don't mind when people are giving me a geek test or something. But it really helps when somebody speaks out. And I don't know, but as a woman, I don't always feel strong enough to do it myself.
Yes, ma'am. I have another question, if that's all right.
Okay.
This should probably hit closer to home, and so it's not so much of a question as it is an observation. Something I noticed throughout the years is that the male's version of sexism actually differs quite a bit from the female's version of sexism.
You mean the way it's perceived on both sides, or
exactly.
the way?
An example being when Bayonetta first came out. A lot of people thought that her character was being blatantly sexist when, when there were more than a few videos on YouTube at various conventions of women from all around saying that, okay, how exactly is this sexist?
Well, I think one of the things that's also really important, especially for video games, is that you want to educate yourself and understand that the response and reading what people have to say and engaging in dialogue is super important. James Portnoy, who you guys might know from actually Credits, I asked him a question at MagFest about critique. Another really good example along the same axis is Bulletstorm. It's a fantastic game. I love People Can Fly. The game is racist. It's full of racist slurs. And the problem, he spends that general spends a lot of time calling people a lot of nasty names.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, of course, it didn't interfere with gameplay. Gameplay was really fun. And I'm willing to give my money to People Can Fly to make games that play like that. But when I've given them my money, how do they know how I feel about the story writing or the content or the way it's portrayed or the way things are portrayed? And the answer is you write about it on the internet, post their forums. James says that these game developers and anime studios read their forums because they want to hear how good they are.
The thing that bothers me about Bayonetta is that she's a type. You feel like you know who she is before you even know her, just because there's so many girls in games that look just like her.
I think I understand that one. Maybe.
Yeah.
But either way, thank you, and I won't take up you or anyone else's time.
I'll take a quick break to say something nice.
Let's go back to
So we also put out a fandom survey that had 51 respondents, might be about 60, but the surveys are still open. And what's funny is that for all the harassment mentioned, everyone who took the response, and actually everyone here finds conventions to be safe, welcoming, and lovely place, especially when fans are generally involved. What I think is really interesting here is that we know that we have something good, that if people, in spite of the fact that cosplayers may receive all kinds of strange treatment, will show up because they feel like they belong, means we have something worth saving. And so I think that we're actually working from a pretty good place, but that means that vigilance is all that tricky.
That was really uplifting, and can everyone hear me if I speak like this, or do I need to speak louder? Okay, thank you. I'll try to make this short so I'm not too much of a downer here, but this is my cosplay. I'm a gender bender. I'm actually really happy with it, but I almost didn't bring it with me to Otakon because the last con I went as this with some of my friends, and I just want you guys all to know it isn't just guys. I mean, in my fandom, there was a lot of girls that were like, what is she doing? Like, they only wanted to see, like, girls cosplaying as guys. And you know what? I think that's just as bad, because what if I want to wear a dress one day? Like, what's wrong with that? This is a problem, too, and, like, a lot of people don't notice that. And, like, don't get me wrong. I did actually get heckled at that convention, too, a couple times by guys. So, yes, I know that's a problem. But you know, I think it's really unfair that people like are mean or hesitant to talk to someone who maybe just wanted to cosplay a female character because they like it.
Right, and I think that your friends and the people who value, that's one of the reasons why I asked the question about why we don't see it, because if I saw it, I'd speak out against it. If you see it happening and you see something bad, it's worth it to the community, I think, to jump into a situation that you're pretty sure is bad. Now, that's a sliding scale. You don't want to cause necessarily more trouble than it's worth, but you know, if you hear someone bad-mouthing someone, the faces in the crowd need to speak out, because those people need to know that this is not a safe place for them if they want to do that to other people. Right?
Yeah, and before I go, I just want to say thanks to you guys for being the most accepting convention I've been to. Have a great day.
Alright, can you hear me in the back? Alright, so basically I want to talk to the nerd test, because I've always considered myself a gamer. Not everyone has. When I was, younger and pudgier and no one found me attractive, and I said I was a nerd, they were like, yeah, I bet you are, When I got an hourglass, I'd say, hey, I'm a nerd, and they're like, what do you play? And since I'm too nervous to play a console game without having a panic attack, I usually just watch Let's Plays, play handheld games. When I say that, they're like, no, that doesn't count, you don't play fighting games, blah, blah, blah. But I've been playing Pokemon since I was 7. I've played all the games. I've seen Let's Plays of every popular game that's come out, but every time I say that, it's oh yeah, no, not really. Even though I've come across guys who haven't played hardly any games ever, and they're still you don't count as a nerd because you're a girl and, you're somewhat pretty, so it doesn't go together.
I mean, the thing is that your friends,
oh no, I tell them that they're fucking rape, sexist all the time.
No, here's the thing. Not only is that not cool, it's really awful. It's your friends. Your friends shouldn't expect you to have to defend yourself all the time. Mm-hmm. No one is standing with you, it's lonely.
Nah, it's perfectly cool. I call them, sexist pigs all the time. They're like, yeah, we are, sorry.
That's not something they should be proud of.
No, it's not.
Did they ever get the tests? I know Patches never gets a quiz.
Oh yeah, I quiz them all the time on just, general stuff, completely, Ace Attorney, all over that shit, all day, every day. And since they're really into Marvel vs. Capcom, they're like, oh, look at Phoenix Wright, he's doing the thing with the thing. And I'm like, it's calling an objection, dude. Look at that evidence. Who the fuck that is, that's Maya Fey. So, and yeah, I mean, it's just things like that I try to do because it helps point out, I'm a different type of nerd than you. That doesn't mean I'm less of a nerd. Okay, that's me.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, and one was long, and I apologize in advance for this.
We got 10 minutes.
Okay, so I had a question about what you thought the connection was between sexism and homophobia in fandom, because that's something I feel like they're necessarily connected, and I did an article a few months ago about homosexuality in fan fiction in the brony community, and sort of the very different attitudes they have toward lesbian-themed fan fiction and gay male-themed fan fiction, and also how I thought what was interesting is that for something that's a girls' cartoon, a lot of the adult fandom, the men in the fandom are often very alienating toward both women and gay and bisexual men. But then on the other hand, I feel like anime in general, what's interesting comparing it to Western media is that, while it's often quite, in my opinion, quite sexist compared to Western media, it's often much more progressive in its portrayal of homosexuality.
Well, I think one of the big problems we have with homosexuality, and I don't want to overstep, but one of the big problems with homosexuality in the Western culture, we tend to associate it with the feminine. And it's easy explanation for the problem with the feminine in our culture is the following. The easy way to describe it is, one, if you had a girl, your little girl, and you told your friends you were sending her to riflery, fishing, hunting, trapping camp, most people, you have progressive friends, but most people will be like, yeah, good for her, teach her how to defend herself, be independent, that's awesome. And you say, yes, I'm sending little Mikey to ballet camp so he can learn to plie. And all of your friends go, that's what? And what it means is that while we say there's some equality that women can do man things, it's still stigmatized for men to do women things. And so long as male sexuality, or heterosexuality for men is tied to a fear of the feminine, because it sort of creates a complexity, you're going to see homophobia come up.
As someone who's done a lot of research on brony fandom, one of the problems...
That's an understatement.
Yeah. One of the wrinkles in brony fandom that's going on is that a lot of people, especially, well, since the media kind of took over and started covering them, there's a lot of assumptions that bronies are gay, and unfortunately, despite the love and tolerance message, it seems like the backlash has been to be like, not only are we not gay, we don't like them. Okay, that's a very small, low, I mean, that's a very, you know, not very many people think that, but I think that could be why you see homophobia in brony fandom, just because of this fear of being...
And you shouldn't be afraid of being called gay.
No,
it's not some insult. You shouldn't be upset when someone says it. I think I was doing on the caption.
But one interesting thing I noticed about lesbian fanfiction, brony fandom, is I feel like often, in contrast to, say, the way that straight women often deal with gay male relationships in fanfiction or like in the yaoi fandom, I feel like a lot of the lesbian stuff that's aimed at straight men or created by straight men is automatically fetishistic and sort of objectifying, and often very alienating to actual lesbian and bisexual women. But the stuff in the brony fandom I found is mostly not that. It's more, at least from what I saw, it's more like what you see with sort of yaoi fanfiction.
Is that demographics, Lauren? Is that because of who's writing it?
It would be...
That would be something we'd have to look into. Things I don't know. It might depend heavily on the makeup of the brony fandom and who's writing that fan fiction. Because if men are writing lesbian fan fiction, it's going to be for men as a male fantasy.
Well, most of it is written by men for men, but it's not as fantasy oriented as a lot of the lesbian stuff that's by men for men that I've seen. So it's interesting.
Unfortunately, I'm not as well versed in brony.
That's the next brony study. There's researchers doing a brony study. Go to bronystudy.org. Next one touches on Rule 34 and fanfics.
There you go.
Can I ask one more question? Or is
6
it?
minutes.
Okay.
6 minutes.
Okay.
There's a time.
Okay. Quick question. Okay.
Can I answer yes or no?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Do you think that the whole issue of the geek test is just in geek culture? Because I've noticed it with a lot of other things that I'm good at, like I'm a classical musician, and I often feel like I have to prove my ability.
You know, any place that was previously a bastion of male control, you're probably going to encounter a test because they don't want you there.
Okay, one of the things I'm noticing, you know, in this, I mean, there is this continuing trend in the gender disparity issue, and one of the things I'm noticing is that there's no real, at least in Western media, I don't think there's really all that strong influences of a positive role models for women. I mean, it's you know, you still have people like, you know, cutting down the binary line that, you know, man is, you know, big, brawny, and you know, and does all the hard work, and woman just stay at home and do all the soft work. And the problem is that, you know, how can I say this? It's a, you know, at some point, you know, when you have that sort of distinctions, you tend to, you know, victimize the females in some sort of way, and.
Complain.
Yeah.
The answer is complain.
Yeah.
Continue to complain and complain loudly.
Yeah, well, the problem is that, you know, how do you prevent, you know, something like
complain and complain loudly. BioWare has been responding pretty well to the complaints that their fan base has been giving them about their portrayal of women characters, and they're getting results.
Yeah, well, yeah, but just hope we don't have any more women in fridges.
Yes.
Alright, then I'll try to make this as quick as possible.
Okay.
This is more of just a sharing thing of personal experience really quick.
Great.
As
identifies as lesbian, I am really sick of seeing men and being harassed by men as like I'm not there to be like a fan service for men. If I like identify as lesbian, I am not here for you guys. I am not here to be making out with other girls for you. I make out with girls for me, and you don't get to watch. And also, just really quick, another thing that I noticed: do not make fun of Muslim girls if they are wearing hijab with their cosplays and they are following their religion with their cosplays. That is not what we do here. We include and accept everybody. And hijabis are really pretty. I'm just gonna say. And on a parting note, I really recommend the anime Princess Tutu as like a really awesome feminist anime. I expect all of you to watch it. It's not. It is about ballet, but it's also like full of really deep and interesting concepts. Thank you.
There's a Tumblr, by the way, called Cosplaying in Hijab, if just anyone likes to check out cosplayers of different ethnicity.
Did you repeat that?
Cosplaying while in hijab. I can't pronounce it very well.
Hear me? Everybody hear me? Yes?
I can hear you.
Okay. Kind of an observation. I've noticed a lot of anime, like you said, that there was a lot more made for men than for women. But it also seems kind of like it's a lot more limited. Like, I mean, with men you have horror, action, you know, this and that. With women you pretty much have slice of life, and I mean, there's no options. You'll notice I'm not in cosplay, and that's because there's not really a lot there for me. It was very hard for me to get into anime and stay there.
Right, and I think that's a problem of that's a problem of the idea of the genres and what the magazines expect their audiences to be. That's why there's like 3 shoujo plots and you've seen them all.
Yeah, they're all the same. And then it's either schoolgirl or it's like, oh, there's a girl that she's badass, or oh, she's wearing a bikini.
Right.
Like, there's no in between.
Right, and the idea is that when things show up on the margin, and my roommate who's back of the line is going to make a face when I say this, you've got to jump on the stuff that's on the margin. When the Princess Jellyfish shows up and it's great, you got to let people know. You got to let the companies know this is the kind of stuff you want. And when Chihaya airs on Funimation, it's like the awesomest thing airing that season. You have to watch it and demand that Nisa pick it up. So long as they think there's a market for these things, they'll continue to create it. The reason why you see a lot of the same things over and over again is because it's safe. And it's our job to let them know that safe won't sell.
Thank you.
Awesome. Sorry, guys. I just wanted to talk about Lauren because my younger sister I've been having issues with her, but then she suddenly said, "Oh, I'm getting an anime." So I was like, "Oh, cool. Well, I'll watch one with you." And she was like, "Okay, I'll pick one." So she picked Oran. And so each day for a couple days in a row, we'd watch 2 or 3 episodes and talk about it. And by the end, we had seen 2 different things. I enjoyed it, I have to say. But she noticed what you commented on, that eventually they're like, oh, you need to be a girl. What I noticed is that the club would have just been guys lazing about unless this girl came in and started saying, oh, look, I'm a girl. And they said, oh, we're guys, we'll impress you.
Right,
so
that's another sort of nasty, pernicious myth about the domesticity of men. Every time an ad tells you that you need a woman to take out your trash, or remember to shave, or wash yourself, that's the media insulting you.
Yeah.
And you need to not stand for that either.
Yeah. I just noticed that, like, a lot of people say, oh, they're pushing a lot of stuff on women, but, like, as a guy fan, I've been made fun of for being a romantic. And I think, yes, it's horrible for both ways, and we should all work together to solve it.
One of the reasons why, yes, so this segues into what I wanted to say is the question about where we go from here. I think we go, where we go from here, I don't have a slide for it, but the issue, there are 2 things. One is that there are a bunch of different resources. I got into anime, I got into feminism long after I got into anime from the Dick Wolves fiasco, which I'm sure most of you are familiar of, and trying to read Shakespeare. It was fantastic, but there are resources, better resources out there. The thing that he mentioned is there's an amazing site by a sometimes con-grower called No Seriously, What About the Men's? Ozzy France writes some really amazing stuff about how the ideas of sexism are just as bad, or not just as bad, she says, not equal, but mirrored sexisms that come out of the way we portray women that affect men. And I'm going to plug it because I think it's way better than I could ever be. People also interested in listening and hearing about critique should really check out the Board House. Should have a link up there, but they are fantastic. Everything I learned about how to open my eyes about what I was taking in comes from the stuff that they did and Film Critical.
I'd like to just add one more, racialicious.com, which is not just racism, but also sexism against women of color. The founder of Racialicious, Latoya Peterson, she's not at Otakon this year, but she does go.
I think that we focus primarily on gender for our panel because of Lauren's experience. Lauren had a come to Jesus moment. Can I say come to Jesus? Come to Jesus moment with the t-shirts thing back in April. But this is an issue. This is an issue that spans lots of things. I'd love to hear more on race and conventions because the audience is really mixed. I'd love to hear more about sexuality conventions because I'm cis and het. Like, I know what I see, and what I see is what society tells me is normal. I don't want to pretend to be the be-all or end-all. In fact, this panel was only possible through the help of Flashlight. I'd like to get some final special thanks to you guys. You guys have been great. And then Lawrence Brenner, who's
filming right here.
And then Meg Pumpkin and Lee Wheatley both gave this panel at SakuraCon and are getting it at Geek Girl Con if any of you going out to the West Coast. And their panel is just as good and a little bit more visceral. Lee works in video games and some of her stories are really troubling. And then Ashley Simpson was our cosplay consultant. Are you here, Ashley? Did you make it? Oh. She told me she was coming. And then a good friend of mine, Irina Vakova, and then all the people who have heard our panel, who may see mention online. I think that's where we are. Does that bring us to time?
I think so.
I think it does.
Okay, that was kind of a weekend, but we're new at this, so cut us some slack.